your performance management can be far more effective if you're also focused at least as much, if not more, on a teachable way, on teaching your expertise, which is sales excellence, to others. And managers get so overwhelmed and sidetracked and all this firefighting and stuff, urgencies that come up during the day, that they never get time. They don't have as much time to get around to coaching. And so I would suggest that anybody listening to this who's in a sales management role, just take a look at your calendar right now.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Kevin Davis. Kevin's the founder of TopLine Leadership and author of the book titled The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness. And today, Kevin and I are talking about the importance of hiring coachable sellers. And we get into why coachability is becoming even more important than it has been in the past. We'll dig into how to screen for coachability during a job interview and talk about the 3 traits of coachability that, as a hiring manager, you should be looking for. And then we also talk about 3 specific tactics for identifying these coachable sellers. All this and much, much more. Before we get to Kevin, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much, Andy. Great to be here.
Great to talk with you again. So where have you been sheltering these past many months?
In the Reno, Tahoe area.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a nice place to be. Little smoky now. The California fires are drifting over this way, but fortunately, we don't have any fires locally, but it's pretty bad down in the Bay Area.
Yeah, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for you because September is sort of the fire season.
Yep, it certainly is.
Yeah, so same thing true here in Southern California. It's September, October are the ones you want to watch out for, and the Santa Ana winds start kicking up. So
exactly.
All right, well, today we're going to talk about the importance of hiring coachable sellers, among some other topics. And this is something you'd written about, and it's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot in context of COVID and increase in virtual work and so on. And I've been thinking, I was thinking back to the days that when I was hiring people for positions in Europe and Asia and Australia. I was opening offices in those places and hiring sellers and sales managers there. And certainly coachability was one, but I hear people talking about that a lot, but there were like other characteristics I thought were equally as important. And I'm just curious in your take on that, because I thought, we got somebody remote, they've got to be self-sufficient to some degree, emotionally self-sufficient. They, if not, intellectually self-sufficient on the product. They have to be resilient. They have to be resourceful. So, in addition to coachability, and we're going to dig into that, but I don't hear people talking enough about screening for those characteristics, right? If you're going to hire a sales team, or if you're moved your sales team virtually, and you think you're going to keep a large chunk of them, if not all of them, virtual for some foreseeable period of time, aren't there more attributes we should be screening for?
Absolutely. Obviously, somebody that is self-directed and motivated is essential, because they have to be able to work independently on their own, and having clearly defined process and standards of excellence, so that we are not just communicating what we are bare minimums, but I would say our best producers. What does your top salesperson do differently in terms of their skills and wills or attitudes, and really look to that as as some of the qualities and characteristics you need to look for.
Well, I was just thinking this in the sort of the larger context is inherent in this whole move to virtual, which was forced on us. We had to do. But we're now making this assumption that everybody has the emotional makeup to work remotely, right? And especially in sales. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that's the case. I mean, again, back to when I was hiring people for these offices overseas, I was like, that was really the first thing I was really more focused on is how would these people be able to survive on their own, coming from environments oftentimes where they were working for companies and they were, office based and out in the field, the hybrid type role. And I just wonder, is this really where the rubber is really going to meet the road for companies that continue to sort of push down this virtual road? Is what if, a substantial portion of their team just can't operate in that environment? We're just assuming they can.
Well, obviously you're going to have problems. I think if you're managing an outside sales team, they've always been virtual. And, as a manager, you could fly in and join them on important customer meetings and things of that nature. So, you had a chance to observe them. I mean, and so that's, I think, one of the big changes is many of the inputs that sales managers had, ways to observe their salespeople in the past have gone away. And, joining a salesperson on an important Zoom meeting, I mean, that's such a small percentage. Of course, the salesperson is going to be well prepared for that, right? It's an important meeting. But what I like to see when I would do a ride along with a salesperson is how are they interacting with all the customers, the other customers that call them? How do, what kind of calls are they receiving during? I mean, today, if you happen to work with a salesperson, they don't want you riding in their car.
That's true. Not for an extended period of time.
Yeah, you're back in the other rental car with a mask on, and if you happen to have a customer meeting, you're probably doing it in the lobby of a company, standing 10 feet away from the customer. I mean, so we've lost our ability to observe in many ways that we had in the past, and so getting back to your original question, it's self-directed. It's the people. I think a lot of outside salespeople have already been working in this virtual world. It's the inside salespeople that are now forced to, work from home. That their life is changed. So you do need to pay attention to, what are those? What are their? I mean, do they have kids running around and kids working from home? I mean, there's just so many different issues to deal with in this challenging time. But I mean, according to the research, this is not going to go away, and people can be more productive and make more calls from home. So,
well, it's more sort of thoughts about the nature of work itself. We've been office centric by and large, as you said, field salespeople notwithstanding, and so increasingly as we switched to inside sales, we've built up and up and up the sales teams in the offices. And I said, I worry about this just sort of an inherent assumption that not just for salespeople, workers in general, that they can go do this for an extended period of time without sort of the human contact, the in-person human contact.
It totally changes, I think, the responsibility of the sales manager to provide more consistent and purposeful communication and coaching to the team as a whole and to individuals on the team. Otherwise, people who work from home, if they don't have interaction with the team and they don't connect as much with the team, they do develop some sense of isolation and, I'm all in this just for me and it's only me here. And they become disconnected from your company. And that's not good. I mean,
I think, that's what I said. I think it's just going to be, I think this is, I don't say the other shoe that's going to drop, but it is a shoe that's going to drop at some point, is that, I don't know how big a percentage of workers it is, but certainly less than the number that are working from home currently, that over time just can't perform in that environment. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see. So,
it is, I mean, to segue into our, the coachability topic, how important is that?
Well, it becomes very, right? I mean, I think that this is this idea of hiring coachable people, being conscious about hiring coachable people as opposed to sort of have a nice to have, but being very conscious about it. It's relatively recent, but it is, to me, it's like number one thing, right?
I completely agree. So let me ask you, Andy.
Sure.
Do you know the origin of the word coach?
No, I could stall you long enough to look it up here online, but no, tell me what it is.
Well, it dates back to the England in the 14 and 1500s, where if somebody wanted to move from point A to point B faster, a horse-drawn coach would enable them to do that.
Right.
And that's where the word coach comes from. So I think the important operational thing there is that the person has to want to move from point A to point B, and the coach helps them get there faster. And so when you start looking at coachability, obviously the person has to want to get better. They have to be committed to implementing your coaching, or they don't really want to move from point A to point B, and then you have a bigger problem.
Well, so that's an interesting point, is they have to want to improve. Now there's more being written. I just recently read a book by Roger Connors called Get a Coach, Be a Coach, which is advocating that increasingly people have to become their own coach.
Yep.
I mean, what is your thought on that? This whole idea of self-directed coaching, is that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that as the end game. But a sales manager can help salespeople to, what percentage of opportunities in a salesperson's funnel does the manager actually get to coach the salesperson on? It's a small percentage, obviously. And so if we can help that salesperson to understand how the sales manager coaches, because we're asking better questions, we're provoking thought, we're helping that salesperson ask questions of him or herself that they, maybe wouldn't be asking before an important meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping them to learn how to coach, and then hopefully they will apply that skill with all of the other opportunities that there are in their funnel, and speed up their cycle of improvement and help them get better faster.
Yeah, so I'm sort of torn on this. I absolutely agree that this idea of self-directed coaching is important, because companies haven't stepped for two reasons. One is, A, companies aren't stepping up to do it, but B, even in the absence of companies stepping up, you still have responsibility for self-improvement. But what's interesting to me in sales is that here, I think, is one of the professions in the business world that is most, sort of performance oriented, right? And you really get out of it what you put into it. I still feel too small a fraction of people make that investment. And I was wondering, it's because in some respects we keep wanting people to do this, make this investment, because we think that sales actually should be treated as more than a job.
When you say sales should be treated more than a job, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's if you're just going to the office 9 to 5, and you do have a desk job, theoretically, right? You sort of say, well, gosh, not a whole lot of incentive to listen to a podcast, read a book, read an article, so on, to get better. But in sales, your compensation is tied to this.
Yeah.
But I still see, on general, too few sellers making that investment. So I call it, they're treating it just as a job as opposed to, I don't know, maybe a lifestyle.
Obviously the best ones do. And when you start to think about what do your best ones do that your average and mediocre producers don't do, certainly, this whole idea of improvement. But I would offer to, flip the coin on that and say that one of the potential reasons why so many salespeople are perceived by managers as uncoachable is because the manager is providing poor quality coaching.
Well, yes, absolutely. Well, absolutely, right? I mean, how many managers have been trained how to coach?
Well, yeah, and with the whole pandemic, it's if you've lost your ability to observe your salespeople in action, the sales manager's natural instinct is to fall back on what they can still see, which is activities and sales results. And that's what I call scorecard coaching. It's a way of, like if you're in the game of golf, if you gave your scorecard to a coach and said, "Hey, what do I need to do to get better?" The coach can't really help you. Well, don't make
Mm-hmm.
a bogey on par threes. you know, I mean, and yet many managers kind of rely on scorecard coaching now because they have difficulty observing their salespeople in action. And so they're just kind of managing the numbers. So I would advise that managers really look at, getting more involved, making more proactive and purposeful connections with your salespeople individually and collectively. I mean,
Well, and embrace technology like Ring DNA that provides you the ability with their conversational AI product to record calls and either self-coach them as an individual or for managers surface coachable moments in the calls where you can come in and help your reps get better.
Absolutely. You've got to take your time and make sure that you have the technology and the tools to see what's going on and then provide better quality coaching because coaching by the numbers is kind of looking in the rearview mirror. We've got to have the purpose of helping salespeople get better and make sure that the advice we're giving them this month is better than the advice we gave them last month.
Well, right. Okay. So that brings up an interesting point because I've raised this question before is if you look at this idea of performance improvement as a process that sellers go through, is I've made this statement before, and I'll ask you this, or I've asked the question before, is if you say, okay, well, if performance improvement is a process and the rate at which a process moves is based on the rate determining step, is that I believe for reps improvement, the rate determining step is just what you said. It's the rate at which their manager gets better.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I don't think sellers can get better any faster at a rate faster than their manager gets better.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Andy. No question. And from a manager's perspective, you can influence your salespeople and you can control yourself. So, what can you as a sales manager do better or differently to make a more meaningful connection to each of your salespeople and speed up their cycle of learning?
So it brings up a bigger question, which is one that I was planning on asking a little bit later, but I'll bring it up now because you're talking about how we enable our sales managers to be better coaches. Because the research shows that the most important thing a manager can do to improve the performance of their people is to effective coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at our annual spend as an industry on sales training, it's like $20 billion a year, of which a tiny fraction is spent on training sales managers. I had a guest on a show named Peter Economy. He's written a book about first-time managers. He writes for Inc. magazine. And he said the average age at which a person gets their first leadership training is like 41 or 42 years old, after they've been a manager for 10 years on average.
Yeah.
So we put these people in a job and we expect them to perform, but we do nothing to prepare them. And so I've been doing this informal poll of people, and I wrote about it on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago and got a couple handful of responses. But I've been asking other people, it's like, well, who taught you how to sell? Other than your own experience, what were the big major influences on you in learning how to sell? And invariably, the number one answer is always the coach or manager.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, we know that effective coaching is the thing that we can do to provide the biggest uplift in sales performance. We know that we have managers who are not trained to be effective coaches, and yet we spend billions, $20 billion a year on training salespeople. What if we flip that and spent that $20 billion on training sales managers instead.
Well, it's music to my ears. I just
well, but it's like, why don't we do it? We know there's a return there.
Yeah, we're just releasing now a new online course called the Sales Manager's Guide to Great Online Course. And I think part of the problem in the past is it's been difficult. It's more costly to bring managers together than salespeople because they're spread out, and there's a reluctance to bring them out of the field and put them into a training, and then they get back to the office after they attended the 2-day leadership summit. If the company did do that, and they've got they 2 days of travel plus the 2 days in the training, and they got 4 days of stuff they got to dig through when they're supposed to be implementing the training. I mean, it's just, so I think a new model for sales manager education that is a remote model that delivers it up in bite-sized chunks, accessible from any device, is something that's will enable sales managers to get better faster and coach the way they should.
Well, and that gets back to this model of self-directed coaching for managers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still feel like in sales, though, and this is that companies have by and large abdicated the responsibility to improve the performance of their sellers and their sales managers.
Well, I think there's two issues here. There's many companies kind of assume that a great salesperson will make a terrific sales manager, but the skills of managing and leading a sales team are completely different than selling skills. That's one point. And then many companies will deliver a general management training program and include the sales managers in the audience, but the sales managers are sitting there in their own minds thinking, managing salespeople is different than managing quality control or production or anything else. So they kind of maybe don't take in as much as they might otherwise because they have this self-perception that they're on an island and they do something that's unique to themselves. They face challenges like, the highly productive salesperson that suddenly becomes stuck in a rut, the prima donna sales rep who thinks is wonderful with customers and then dumps all over everybody inside the company, treats them horribly, and thinks the world owes them a favor. You have the disillusioned beginner, right? I mean, who's kind of hit that wall and isn't seeing the success that he or she thought they would, and how you deal with that. I mean, these are all challenges that are unique to a sales manager's role, and many sales managers haven't really ever been educated on how to do it. In fact, I'll share this.
None of them have.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Eleanor Roosevelt had this quote, which is great. She said, "Learn from the mistakes of others. You can't live long enough to make them all yourself."
Well, so here's a question for you, and this is the topic I'm exploring a lot on the show with other guests, is, in my opinion, we fundamentally manage sales the same way we've been doing it for 100 years. Yeah, we've got this senior sales leader, VP, CRO, whatever title we give them these days, and we assume, since they're in that role, that they are an expert in all these various areas you just started talking about, in mindset and motivation and psychology, right? You're talking about people in a slump, how you get people out of a slump, in performance improvement, which is a distinct skill itself, performance coaching. I can sort of create this long list of things that somebody assumes they're the expert in that. And there's assuming that the next level down, they have some expertise in that as well. And yet these people have never, ever been trained in order to do it. Yeah. It seems like we have to sort of radically rethink how we manage sales. I mean, for instance, Do managers need to coach? Why shouldn't we have specialized coaches? We're doing specialized sales roles. We've got BDRs, SDRs, AEs, AMs, CSMs, and it works. It still needs to be fine-tuned and tweaked, but it can work. Why aren't we specializing management roles? Why aren't we specializing staff roles to improve performance?
That's a good point. I think I have seen some organizations that have designated the position of sales coach. I've definitely seen that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge is that when you do that, essentially you give your sales managers the freedom to not be responsible for coaching.
Yeah, that's not their job. Their job is to manage the team to hit a number.
Yeah. Right. We have a designated sales coach who teaches them how to sell, and it's the same thing like sales training is going to take care of that. My job is to manage the numbers. And look, sales performance management is definitely part of the equation. You have to communicate to individual salespeople and the team what the company expects in terms of behaviors, activities, and results. That's absolutely true. But your performance management can be far more effective if you're also focused at least as much, if not more, on a teachable way, on teaching your expertise, which is sales excellence, to others. And managers get so overwhelmed and sidetracked and all this firefighting and stuff, urgencies that come up during the day that they just, they never get time. They don't have as much time to get around to coaching. And so I would suggest that anybody listening to this who's in a sales management role, just take a look at your calendar right now. How many coaching sessions do you have scheduled with your salespeople? Because we can complicate this, but it is very simple. If you want to be a better coach, it starts with committing part of your calendar to coaching on a regular basis. And there's a lot of different types of coaching conversations you can have, top 5 deals in your funnel. You want to pick deals at various stages in the funnel. You can do a one-on-one monthly performance review. You can do a loss review, a postmortem. You can do role playing. You can review the call that Ring DNA helped you record and play it back and coach the salesperson. I mean, there's a multitude of teachable things that a sales manager can do, because the sales manager is the most capable seller on the team. And the question is, how effectively are sales managers teaching their expertise? And when they do get that, when they buy off on that and they commit to it with their calendar, their sales performance management improves exponentially, because they're not just talking about numbers and how many calls the salesperson made. They're actually talking about specific, tangible things the salesperson can do to get better. And they essentially become a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, I think with a lot of frontline managers is, and not too dissimilar when I got promoted pretty quickly into frontline manager, maybe 20 months into my first sales job.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wasn't a sales expert. I'd been selling for a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, I just, and this is, just a topic that, when I get back to this idea about hiring specialized coaches and so on is I think it's unfair to expect frontline managers who are newly promoted. We shouldn't have the expectation they're sales experts, because they're not. But coaches could be.
Well, I tell you what I've seen in that when companies commit to that career progression of sales coach followed by, I mean, it is usually the sales coach position is the stepping stone to become the manager, right? And what does that say?
Self-defeating. Yes.
Well, yeah, it says, hey, the sales coach is, if you're a really good sales coach, maybe you too can become a manager.
Yeah, which is really backwards because it should be a parallel position. It should be, a career, not a stepping stone.
Exactly.
I mean, I use the example, and people who listen are probably tired of hearing this, but the example of sports. Yeah, because that's a performance-based, professional sports, performance-based profession, right?
Yep.
And the closest analog there is analogy there is to sales. And you look at the coaching staffs and what they do, and increasingly, they've specialized. They have physical performance, they have mental performance coaches, physical performance coaches in multiple dimensions. One's health and nutrition, the other's strength. You just look at the coaching staff of almost any professional sports organization. It's radically different than what it was years ago when it was, a couple position coaches and so on. Now they've got all these specialists. And they make a career out of being those specialists oftentimes. So it's like, isn't that a model for what we should be doing in sales? Is let's have these specialized roles, the sort of the height of it, which is still a little controversial in soccer land, but Liverpool, it's my favorite club in soccer.
Yep.
They have a coach that's paid just to coach throw-ins.
Really?
Yeah. Now, he's one of the few that have done that, but others are coming along because they found that there is a tactical advantage to being able to execute certain plays and motions, if you will, off of a throw-in.
Yeah.
That lead to, higher, the statistic that of expected goals that lead to an expected goal rating of a certain shot. And it's like, well, we can do something like that. But I think we have this reluctance to invest. The study that we all have seen about sales coaching is 18% uplift in performance through effective coaching, on individual performance through effective coaching. 18% pays for a lot of coaches.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
I mean, every time somebody says, well, we can't afford that, it's like, well, look, can we afford not to, given the sort of state of things right now? I mean, state of things being, again, we've all seen the reports, roughly only 50% of reps make their quota year after year, yada, yada, yada. It's like, something should change.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm just trying to blow everything up.
Well, that's your professional role, responsibility.
Yeah, muckraker. But it's true, though. I think that we're just stuck. What we've done is we've taken this layer of technology and put it over sales, and we said, oh, this changed everything. And in reality, it's changed nothing.
Yep. I don't disagree with that. But, speaking of coaches.
Yes.
And coachability.
Yes.
So I was reading Jay Wright, who is the men's head basketball coach at Villanova University.
Yep.
He has a motto that he uses in recruiting players. Now, he's, by the way, been their head coach for almost 20 years, won 2 national championships.
Yep.
So an accomplished coach. He says...
Yeah, for a tiny Catholic school on the East Coast, yes. He
looks for players who are both hungry and humble for coachable. He says, I will only hire coachable people. How does he find a coachable salesperson or coachable basketball player? He looks for players who are hungry and humble. And I think, the hungry part we all get, right? That's somebody who's goal-oriented, driven, and all that kind of stuff. We get that. But the humble, I would think that Coach Wright would want, somebody who's bold and brash, self-confidence to overcome any difficulties. But Coach Wright has a great insight here. He says that humility is essential to coachability. It's a prerequisite, according to Coach Wright. That, and when you think about it, you kind of agree, because the humility is hey, maybe I'm not as good as I can be. And so then I started thinking about, well, geez, maybe sales managers should start looking for candidates that have a little more humility following Coach Wright's guidance on this. And how do you spot that in an interview process? And I think one of the answers is to ask a candidate, tell me about the biggest loss. And if the candidate kind of blames external factors or other reasons as to why they lost the deal, pricing is too high, those types of things, that's probably not a candidate with the humility to recognize that they are part of the reason that they lost that deal, a lack of skills or a lack of application or execution of what their company taught them to do led them to lose. I don't know. What do you think about that? It's a humility issue.
Yeah, well, I think it's a specific type of humility. And so when I was reading that quote from Coach Wright, it struck me as that, and I think this is oftentimes the case in sales and in hiring and so on, is that, yeah, we want somebody that's humble in the sense of, being self-effacing and modest and so on. That's great. But I think in these cases, what we're really talking about is intellectual humility, and which is the ability to acknowledge there are things they don't know. Right. Yeah. And I think in a player, I think that's what Coach Wright was really talking about. It's players that have that sense that, yeah, there are a lot of things I don't know that if I learn will help me get better. And I think back to actually something I posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, which is still going strong in terms of people reacting to it and commenting on it, was a quote from Kobe Bryant about sort of what he thought was the most important attribute he brought to the game in terms of improvement. And he said curiosity.
That's
so
great.
It wasn't spending extra hours in the gym and so on. It was curiosity to learn more about how to, the strategy, tactics, moves, skills, whatever, is never being satisfied that you know it all.
Right.
And I love this sort of juxtaposition that someone told me recently, which I've been reusing a lot, is that, you want people who are learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls.
Well, I think your example of the Liverpool coach who specializes in throwing the ball in is a great example of that. I mean, wow, think about all those players that thought they knew it all. And then all of a sudden a coach came along that specializes in throwing in the ball. I mean, maybe there's some more things about something I've been doing all my life that I don't know. I wonder what this guy or gal can teach me.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And this is what I think managers oftentimes are afraid of, right? Is the idea that they're put in these jobs, and again, they presume their managers think that they are the experts. And therefore, if they have to ask for help, they're somehow weak. And this is played out for years in sales. And it's just ridiculous. We can't expect frontline managers or directors or even VPs to be the font of all knowledge about human performance.
Yeah.
So, you have to be able to open up and be in an environment where you'd say, there's so many things I want to learn about this. We need more specialists brought in to help us. And I think that, for me at least, as I look at sort of the future of sales and sales management, it's more specialization that can be a more specific benefit to individual contributors.
I think that's spot on. And I think that if you have salespeople who are coachable because, hey, we're providing better quality sales coaching.
Yes.
I think that coachability is a prerequisite for loyalty.
Absolutely. That is the part of the equation is if we're going to move to a direction where we're providing greater specialization, more fine-tuned specialization on certain roles and skills, mindset, and so on. in helping our sellers get better, you've got to hire someone who's coachable. Otherwise, you're wasting it.
Yeah, you're wasting it. And obviously, from the salesperson's perspective, if your company can help them get better faster, help them increase their income and achieve more of what they want faster, then they're going to become loyal. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, Andy, about, you ask sellers, who helped you the most, and they relate back to one of their previous sales managers that had a huge impact on them. And that's maybe, that's the manager that we still think of. And mine was Guy Campbell, and I stayed with that company for 10 years, and he was one of the reasons that helped me along in the early phase of my sales career. So, we all have
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, in 2 weeks from when this is being recorded, so it'll be after this is published. But my guest on the show is going to be my first sales manager.
No, that's great.
Yeah. So he's
not going to ask you for a call report, is he?
No, that's funny. I should have asked that. But he just retired from a sales career, as a very successful career as a senior executive at HP, and but it was fun reconnecting because he had a big influence on me. So, all right, Kevin, we've run out of time, but tell people how they can connect with you and learn more about what you're doing.
Well, our website is called TopLineLeadership.com, and I'm the author of a book called The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness, which is available on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. And by the time you listen to this, we'll have released our new Sales Manager's Guide to Great online course, where sales managers can get the education that is so important to becoming a great sales manager. I think that, it takes a great sales manager to build a successful sales team. And, so for a limited time, we're offering a free lesson on deal coaching. What are the 3 steps to having better pre-call strategizing conversations with your salespeople? So if you go to toplineleadership.com, you'll find your way to the free lesson and check it out. And there's 36 more after that. So,
all right. Self-directed coaching, as we talked about. All right, Kevin, thank you very much, and look forward to doing it again.
Andy, thanks so much. You take care.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, we're so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, Kevin Davis, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you for your help. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.